Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. In this week's video, we are going to look at 5 things that we can still learn from Daniel Avery's seminal album, Drone Logic, that came out in 2013, so it's over 10 years old. And at the end of it, we'll put together a little sound-alike that sounds like this. So a little backstory, Daniel had already put out an EP on Fantasy Records, which is Errol Alkin's label, and he had a bit more energy and a bit more sort of drive to get back in the studio. He had a studio space that was right next to Andrew Weatherall's, and he made a track with Andrew's club night in mind. But instead of me talking about it, let's hear it from an interview from Daniel himself.
The first EP went really well and it got an attention that I wasn't really expecting. So I had this new energy about going to the studio. And that track I made, I don't always do this, but that track I made specifically with a club in mind and a DJ in mind. I made that track for Andrew Weatherall to play and his club night, A Love from Outer Space, which was kind of based on that sort of slow, swaggering, psychedelic music. Yeah. So I thought, let's try and make that a track that goes in for him. And
did he play it?
Well, I was fortunate enough that just about a year before that, I'd started working in a studio next door to his in Shoreditch. So the finished mix version, I was able to hand to Weatherall and on a CD. And he called me up the next day and said, that thing you gave me, I played it last night and it was the biggest record of the night.
No.
So I called Errol immediately, kind of hands shaking, saying, look, this just happened. And that was the point when Errol said, okay, I think it's time we made an album now. And that's how Drone Logic, the album, started life.
So using interviews that I found from Reddit, Reverb, obviously YouTube and other places, I kind of put together a list of things that, in my opinion, make this album so good and still sound so good today. So let's get into it. So point number 1 is how Daniel uses synth drums and live drums to make up the drum tracks within his records. And I find that this, as opposed to using samples, can give you a perfection in imperfection. You use a sample and it's going to be perfect through the whole thing, and you can kind of get a little bit of ear fatigue. If you use something that's a little bit unsteady, like an analog synth to make the drums, you're going to get that variation across the whole track. Same with live drums. Obviously, you can program with mechanical bits and whatnot, but to have a live drummer give that energy to different parts of the track, you can really help the track come alive and not just be using a hi-hat sample or a drum sample across the whole board. So to demonstrate this and showing how you can use this technique at home, we are going to first make a drum sound on the monopoly, just a kick drum, and we can see how the sound changes over time just using the same sample. And then we're going to show how you can use a sample put into a sampler and some things you can do to change that sound over time. So let's make the kick drum. You can see here we've got the monopoly. For those who haven't used a monopoly, it is pretty basic. And as the name suggests, you can either have it mono or you can use these different oscillators to create a poly chord. So for this sound, we just have a normal oscillator, but we're going to turn all of the oscillators down. We're going to come across and we're going to use the same technique that I've used in a few of my other videos. We're going to get that resonance all the way to full. We'll turn the cutoff all the way down, and we've just got the envelope amount here. So already, if I turn that resonance down, got nothing. And when I get right to the end, that's when we can start to hear it. I have a MIDI clip just with a 4/4 pattern, so I'm going to play that while I kind of shape the sound. So I've just turned both the VCF and the VCA down. Let's turn the VCA, so this would be equivalent to the the volume of the synth. So we'll just turn that up a little bit. Give us a little bit of release. I want to use this filter here to kind of shape it a little bit. So let's go. It's going to give us that little knock to it. So we've just turned up the filter amount here, the envelope amount. And let's turn the volume down. And these are going to be really small amounts that we're moving stuff. So that's like halfway between 0 and 1. Let's get a bit of release. And then a bit of sustain in there. And that's pretty good, but it's pretty crazy. So let's dial it back a little bit on the amount. And then we can shape the amp envelope again. So, and that's pretty good. So let's record in what we have, and then we can have a look at the actual sound of we can have a look at the waveform of the drums, and you'll be able to see the inconsistency across the board. So I've just recorded in a section, and as you can see on the screen, they're pretty close. I was actually surprised at how close they were because I made this kick drum previously and there was more movement in it. So it's just interesting to see that these are a little bit tighter, but if you kind of look at the waveforms here, you can see there's a slight variation. It's really, really subtle, but you can hear slight difference. I don't know if I'm just messing with my own head by saying that, but I feel like you can hear slight changes to the sound because it is coming from an analog synth and it is slightly changing over time. So it's all well and good, but it can be pretty hard to get yourself a monopoly. So let's look at what you can do by taking one of these samples, putting it into a sampler, and then being able to make those little changes so you get more of a live feel. So I've gone to put the sample into the Logic sampler, but you can use any sampler plugin that has a little bit of modulation and allows you to kind of use a mud matrix to adjust different parameters within that synth. So we just have the sound as it is. That's great, but we do want to make those little changes. So what I'm going to do is use the mod matrix here. We're going to have the source, and this is what we wanted to look to for the change. So we're going to use velocity, and then we're going to use, where are we? We're going to use pitch, and then we're going to use velocity again, and we're going to use volume as the destination. So as I have different velocities on when it's getting played by the MIDI, it's going to affect the pitch just a little bit and it will affect the volume just a little bit. So it's going to kind of simulate the changes that you would see or rather hear from an analog synth. So let's start with the volume, and we have our sound. So here's the sound here. And then if I change this to a lot, so if so that's a light tap and that's a heavy tap. So we could probably go the other way and just pull the volume down. That's a light tap and that's a full. Let's go even more. So you can hear there's the changes in just the small amount of volume. We can pull that back for now. Let's actually just bring it back to 0. And then we're going to do the same thing for the pitch. So let's You can hear there when I hit it hard, it's like pitching it up a lot. And then a little bit of velocity is giving us a little change. So what we can do is just bring this down just a little bit, and then we're going to move this even less. Got our bit there, so let's consolidate this. And we'll go in. I'm going to select all function. We're going to go, function, MIDI transform, random velocity. And it's giving us like a little amount here. Let's push that up to about there. We'll go select and operate. You can hear that's a lot going on there. So let's bring that up a little bit more. Select and operate. Could even pull this top value down. We just want small changes. So that's pretty good. You can hear those changes coming through now. What we can also do is just bring up the sampler again. And then for the volume, let's adjust that a little bit less. And there you go. The way that we've created a little bit of variation that you would kind of see on an analog synth, giving us that perfection in perfection. Again, live drums, no real need to demonstrate that because we all know you can use drums, plugins within your computer, or you can, if you're lucky enough to have a real drum kit, you can use those. The second point I wanted to bring up is the relationship between the bass and the kick. It's providing this rhythm that within a lot of the tracks that are more the sort of club focused, in my opinion, the more club focused ones, that bass line and kick drum is just something else. It's really groovy, and it's kind of giving you that psychedelic feel. So let's look at a way that we can kind of create something similar and some steps that we can use to kind of get us to that point. So first things first is we need to make the bass. So we have a kick at the moment. Let's pull that resonance down, and we're just going to use the one oscillator. So we are going to switch it over to, we've got it set to pulse, giving us like a square wave. You can hear, you might be able to pick it up if you're using headphones. There is a little bit of noise there. Let's open up the filter a little bit and open up that resonance. Let's pull down that envelope amount, and then let's set these envelopes. Adjusting the amp envelope a little bit. Let's pull that sustain down. We just want a very plucky sort of bass. I have a little MIDI clip that we can play along so we can hear the actual sound. Just needed a little bit more of the envelope amount to kind of get that nice bite to the sound. So that's all well and good, but that's his pattern. So now that we've got something in the ballpark, sound-wise, let's look at how we can create something to kind of get that groove. And again, this is very similar to the one that the tutorial I did about bass lines and acid bass lines. So let's put in 16 notes. And then let's select them all, and then we're going to mute them. And then we're going to unmute different bits and pieces to kind of get us closer to the rhythm that we're after. So go up a little bit. What we can do, let's make it 2 bars long for the pattern. And we're going to come back in, and I'm going to keep this sort of pattern here going. And maybe just grab this section here and go here. And I'm just kind of doing stuff a little bit random. Maybe those two. Maybe this one here. So I think we're kind of in the ballpark. The other thing that I heard just now that I think could be really good is do a B section and just have this pattern repeating. Let's see how that sounds. No, it's not that pattern. It is this one. Mute. Just one gap in between. Maybe 4 there. And then when you do that pitch down, oh yeah, okay, that sounds pretty good. Pretty good. So I wasn't even planning on doing the 2 sections, but it sounded really good, so just roll with it. So we've got our first section MIDI notes here. So we're going to start to push and pull some notes around and kind of see what's going on in terms of kind of get more of a melodic feel. I find that with the majority of his bass lines, he's not going too crazy. That's not doing big walks and everything like that. We're just going to look for some notes to kind of accent it and kind of help drive home this rhythm that we have between the kick and the bass. Maybe that. Maybe this up here. Maybe this doing the same sort of thing. maybe just not so much movement. That up there, maybe this one. And then when we go down one octave, I feel like this could even be less busy down the back here. And maybe this one here. No, this one, this one. Maybe the skip sounds cool, but I don't think it works. So I think we're kind of getting in the ballpark, and you can see the techniques I'm using to get us closer. It's definitely a trial and error, and I didn't plan anything for this. I didn't try and like come up with a pattern beforehand and then just kind of do the numbers. I was just going by the feel and everything like that. So you could see the technique. Probably wouldn't be too married to this one, but I do like the second section. I would just want to think of that A section because I love it, that B section when you drop down that one octave. So the fourth thing that we're going to talk about is the use of effects and sounds to kind of create this world. So we've seen in multiple interviews that he has said that he's used the monopoly, the SH-101, and maybe some other bits and pieces on this album. And he also said that he used the Space Echo. I'm not sure if he had enough money for a tape machine one or if he's just used this Space Echo. But you can hear that with the use of just a few elements and some effects to kind of reinforce those sounds, he has created its own world. You listen to that and it has a cohesiveness across of it. So in the track Naive Response, towards the sort of back half of it, you can hear the use of the echo, and I'll show you just like a little demonstration. We just have the kick and this little synth line. And then when I bring in the effect, and you can mess with the rate here. And that's without it. Bring it back in. So you can hear the use of the Space Echo in this space sort of album, the psychedelic album. Really, as I said before, really helps drive home the the themes and the sounds of the whole album to kind of give it that cohesiveness. And the last thing I wanted to talk about is the less is more. You can hear throughout the album and in obviously the interviews that he'd used a very minimal amounts of equipment from what I could find out. Obviously he might have been telling fibs the whole time, but from what I read is he used a couple of synths and just this limitation, and obviously the limitation, not so much with the limitation of the computer, but the limit that he put on the amount of tracks that he had in there, it allows for the elements to breathe more and give life to the whole track. So I find that using a couple of elements for the cohesive sound, using them very well within the track and the arrangements, not overdoing it, and obviously creating this world really helps have this album that still sounds really good today. So I know it's really hard to kind of replicate doing too much, but I've got just 2 little drum loops in here, like little percussive loops, and a little pad line. The pad line, I find that it's pretty good, so we can have a listen to that. So you can hear there, the pad line, you can mess around with the filtering as you go along. And it really helps sort of tie the whole sections together. But when you add some other bits on top of this groove, it's when it starts to get a little bit busy, in my opinion. And I would definitely feel like it needs more, but it doesn't need any more. So I've got these little 2 here. And again, it's hard to tell what it would be like if there was more drums and stuff like that, but we can just take a listen and you can make up your own mind. So this one, I got this little drum loop here. Not so much at all, but if we add it in. And then without it, without the pad. So as you can hear there, it might not be the best loop, but you can hear that it's adding a little bit too much. And then we have this one here. If we put that in, and again, the same sort of thing. I feel like it takes away from that main groove that he's developed with that kick and bass. So that's about it for this week. Hopefully you've got something out of it. And after digging through all these interviews and everything like that, I can see why this is one of my favorite albums, just because of the restraint that he's held when producing the tracks, and obviously the elements that he's left behind. It sounds phenomenal. If you haven't given it a listen, definitely go and check it out. And until next time, see you later.